There we go. All right. Good morning again, everybody. So this is the bit where I talk for a little while. And not surprisingly, I'm going to talk about the precepts today. So this is the fourth, fifth, sixth time I've talked about these particular precepts. I've been working through it in stages. If you haven't heard them and you would like to catch up with the other talks, they're all out there on the, you can get links to them there on the website. So I'm going to pick up in the middle here, which is with the grave precepts, starting with I vow not to kill. So a little bit of context and a refresher or context for those who aren't familiar with this. The precepts are generally taken, and we here certainly take them as a training construct. These are not vows. I will never do this, I will never do that. These are, I'm not going to kill. What does that mean? I know that for this to continue to live, it's going to kill stuff. There's no way out of that. Just no way. So what does not killing mean? Why do I say that? How do I live into that? So these are aspirational, these are for training and to help us guide our lives. The pure precepts are really I guess you could say the refuges are really the ground of this. Because the refuges, we're saying, I take refuge in Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. There's solace in there, there's a home there, there's a place of safety and security. There's a place I go for protection, for humility, for grounding. So that's the foundation. The pure precepts are refraining from evil. Evil in a Buddhist context generally has the connotation of ignorance, of not seeing clearly, of acting without really knowing what's going on, and that's knowing at a deep intuitive level. I vow to make every effort to live in enlightenment. That's to wake up, see clearly what's going on, see that none of this is what I really think it is. It doesn't mean it's not here, it's just not what I think it is. Suffering's real, but the way we relate to it is unhealthy, unhelpful. So to see this more clearly. And I vow to live and be lived for the benefit of all beings. This is the profound interdependence of everything. This is not separate from any of you, and none of you are separate from me or from each other. We're in this together, and there's no way out of it. And it's fully embracing and leaping into that as a reality of our lives. So if you looked at the language underneath the pure precepts, there's three simple lines, and then there's language underneath. The language underneath is the commentary by a 13th century Japanese teacher, the founder of the Japanese Soto Zen lineage, Dogen, A.A. Dogen. And he's taking these precepts, which are statements of guidance on how I live my life, guidance on how we all choose to live our lives, and he's stepping back from them with all of these and looking at the non-dual side of it. So non-duality, there's this world we live in where that hurts, that makes a noise. If I drop that from too high, it will break. There's just this world of stuff and people. And then there's, which we can call the relative, the manifest, the born. And then there's the noumenal world, which is the absolute, the unborn, the unmanifest. It's kind of what, it's Buddha nature. It's what a lot of people would call God. It's this, the other side of reality. It's the backside of the carpet of our lives. So non-duality is bringing those two together, not choosing between those two. Waking up isn't going into this nothingness, going into the unborn. Waking up is truly holding both of those together. The non-dual is beyond those two. It's being able to live and hold both of those together in our lives. And just very intuitively, when we start thinking about it, one of my favorite Zen phrases is just a hair's breadth of difference opens up the gap between heaven and earth. As soon as we start thinking about this, as soon as we start noticing it, boom, that destroys it. So it's being in that, it's like the sunrise over the Grand Canyon, and it's just that moment, and living constantly in that moment. So from there, the verses, so the grave precepts, which we'll talk through, are these statements of how to live life, aspirational or guidance on how to live life, and the verses underneath are generally trying to take us into that non-dual perspective, which is, Dogen has these wonderful tricks with language where he uses language to break down language. So that's what's going on here. That's why you can't understand it, because they are not comprehensible. They're not comprehensible here. They're comprehensible here or here. So that's where we land on this language of Dogen's down here. So I vow not to kill, self-evident. By not killing life, the Buddha tree seed grows. So life is pervasive. The universe is alive. Gaia was James Lovelock coming up with the idea that the earth is a single living organism that is, at this point, 3.8 billion years old as a living organism. The universe is alive. It's in all of us. So vowing not to kill in this non-dual sense is being connected with this intimate fabric of life and really feeling that everywhere. You go out and you see it in the trees, you see it in the butterflies and the insects. You feel it in the microbes that are living on the hood of your car. It's everywhere. It's just everywhere. So this is about connecting with that. I vow not to take what's not given. The non-dual side of that is, on the one hand, it's already mine because you are me. Your stuff is already mine and mine is already yours. There's no separation here. And the other side is, there's really no stuff to take and there's no need to take it. This is all, this idea of owning stuff, the idea that somebody flew to the moon and stuck a flag in it and said, this is ours? What on earth is that about? Really? Just crazy. So that's the non-dual side of this. I vow not to misuse sexuality. Sexuality can be really, really beautiful and a really wonderful way, and actually a way of opening up precisely to this non-dual that we're talking about. That intimate sexual relationship with somebody can be a deeply profound spiritual and connective experience. But if abused, it can be profoundly harmful. And tragically, it is something that in a lot of spiritual lineages has been abused and has caused a lot of harm. So the non-dual verses here are inviting us to see that self-other engagement between self and other, this is already pure. Anything we do, there's nothing to be added, there's nothing to be taken away. Our thinking about engaging in this, our playing games with intellectually with how we relate to self and other. There's the same's true in a lot of the meal verses. Where you see meal verses, they'll talk about the giver, the receiver, and the gift, which is the food. And there's the same valence in the relationship with food. It's like treating everything with profound respect, just as it is, without needing to interfere with it. To refrain from intoxicants. Well, part of this is, what is an intoxicant? Pretty much anything done in excess is an intoxicant. Video games, driving cars fast. There's probably food on that table in there that we're about to eat that could become intoxicants. If anybody's brought any chocolate chip cookies, for example, guilty. What's an intoxicant? So this is about recognizing the importance of clarity in our lives, about keeping clear. And anything that clouds our vision, clouds our perspective, from this perspective, is an intoxicant. I vow not to slander. One of another Zen saying is, this was Huineng. He said, I have double vision. I see only my own faults. I do not see the faults of others. What a wonderful way to live. Go together, appreciate together, realize together, and actualize together. There's this sense of togetherness, being together and not judging across the boundary. There's a self and an other, but at the same time, there's a oneness in that self and other. So it's not judging across that boundary. I vow not to praise self at the expense of others. a lot of that feels very similar. So I could distinguish, but I won't. It's just very similar. I vow not to be avaricious. What is there to be avaricious about? And again, this is one I have no idea where I heard this. I have the world's largest seashell collection. They're beautiful. I keep them on the beaches of the world. What is there to be avaricious for? You step outside and it is just, it's all there, it's beautiful. It's again this point of ownership. What is this idea of ownership? Ownership only causes harm. We are rich in accordance, but we are measured. Our richness is measured by that which we can, not by that which we have, but by that which we can do without. Our possessions possess us. These are hackneyed statements, but they're true. We all know in our heart these are true. So why do we go around wanting to have stuff? Seeing something and going out to Amazon and saying, I'll get 2. I vow not to be avaricious. From the beginning there has been no stinginess at all. This was in the Beatitudes as well, right? The birds of the air don't worry about tomorrow, the food of tomorrow. I'll take care of it. Why do you? I vow not to harbour ill will. Oh my goodness. Ill will. Hate the sin and not the sinner. Did I get that one the right way around this time? Thank you. Ill will. The statements at the bottom there's a notion of illuminated clouds and a notion of bright clouds. Again, it's poetry and we can't explain poetry, so I'm not going to try and explain it. But there's a sense within those two phrases that is a common sense and is a really important sense. The sun is bright, it shines, it penetrates, it cuts through the fog and the mist, and we can see clearly in the light of the sun. It's warm, it's penetrating. There's a valence of wisdom, of seeing through and knowing clearly what's going on and recognizing the non-separateness, the foolishness of ill will, that if you are me, why would I feel ill will towards you? It doesn't make sense. So that's the radiance or the bright, and the illuminated, the moon, and that's a yellow light, and the moon is a silver light, or it's a gold light. The moon is a silver light. It's a cool light. It's a gentle light. And generally that cooler light is reflective of a sense of compassion. And wisdom and compassion are the two wings of awakening. You know, to have one without the other, the bird doesn't fly. So wisdom and compassion, and the bright and the illuminated have that flavor. And bring compassion to bear on ill will. Where does it come from? And who am I to judge that anyway? And if there's ill will there, why not go to the root of it and see if anyway. I vow not to disparage the 3 treasures. The 3 treasures are what we talked about right at the beginning here, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. And not disparaging what is a fairly obvious valence of, don't disparage any faith. Don't go around, I'm a Buddhist, the Hindus are certainly, Christians don't get it, Muslims don't get it. No, I mean, don't disparage is a fairly obvious thing. But the non-dual side of this is the first line, to expound the Dharma with this body is foremost. Live this, embody it, be this. This practice, and in particular these precepts, need to be alive, and they need to be lived. So this is encouraging us to bring them in here and actually take them out into the world with us. Not so much take them out into the world with us, but let them soak in so that when we go out into the world, the precepts are actually going out into the world. And that's what shows up. It's that whole way of life. That's what shows up. So to finish off, just a few verses on the back. This full moon morning, traditionally the precepts are recited in accordance with cycles of the moon. Certainly the full moon, quite often also on the half moon. occasionally on the quarter moons. It depends on what tradition and how deeply embedded in monastic life you are. In a lot of traditions, there are 5 lay precepts in the Theravadan tradition, which line up fairly similarly to what we've already done here. And then there are an additional 3, which are not to eat after midday, not to listen to music or jewelry or engage with entertainment, and not to lie on a high bed, which always sounds odd, but if you think about it, there's a difference in lying on the ground and lying off the ground. And if you talk to people who spend a long time actually sleeping on the ground, you put them on the bed and they can't sleep, because the earth's vibrating at 40 hertz and they can feel it. There's a sense of groundedness, there's a sense of connectedness that comes if you're really intimate with sleeping on the ground. So that's really, I think, where that one comes from. But anyway, there's those 3 additional precepts, and there is a tradition with many of these communities that lay practitioners are invited to come and participate in the precepts renewal, and on those full moon or full moon and half moon days, they observe those 3 additional precepts just for that day. So, cycles of the moon. The Bodhisattva way, a Bodhisattva is an awakening being, which is somebody who themselves are on the path to waking up. Arguably they really are, they've just decided not to call it quits. But the reason they've decided not to call it quits, keep on coming back to help, is because their vow, which we will say together later, is to continue coming back until all beings are saved from suffering. And they're offering the merit of, we are offering the merit of that practice, which hopefully becomes our practice, to all world systems, not just this little planet we live on, but to all the worlds, and to all beings, born and unborn. All Buddhas, there are many ways folks look at this, but there have been Buddhas in the past, there are Buddhas today, there will be Buddhas in the future. Buddha is just somebody who sees clearly what's going on from perspectives of wisdom and compassion. 10 directions, up, down, 4 cardinal, 4 intermediate. It's just like all around, radiating this. 3 times, past, present, and future. All honored ones, that generally points to Buddhas, but it's hard sometimes to distinguish between Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. There are 3 words or phrases that are often used in Sanskrit. There are Bhagavan, which is which means honored one, or it's an honorific that's often used for like Krishna and Shiva and the deities of the pantheon. They're not the pantheon. The deities of the Sanatana Dharma. It's also used in the Pali scriptures for Buddha. He's referred to by the title people use him. His honorific is Bhagavan. Arhat means perfected one, and I can't think of the phrase, but it's the same root as Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, which means completely perfect, awakened one, but I can't think of the word right now. Bodhisattva, Mahasattvas, we've talked about Bodhisattva. Mahasattva is great being. Those 2 words are hyphenated, they are one thing. This is acknowledging that those Bodhisattvas who are here to save us, and hopefully that we become those, are indeed great beings. There is no greater kind of being, the one who lives purely to remove suffering of others. Wisdom beyond wisdom, Mahaprajna Paramita. Mahaprajna is wisdom beyond wisdom, which is some flavor of this wisdom and compassion. There's an argument that wisdom beyond wisdom simply is compassion. Paramita, that's one of these wonderful words that actually has, it's intentionally ambiguous. Paramita is perfection, and it's most usually translated as the perfections. And these are, there are 6 or 10 depending on tradition, and they look a lot like the precepts, but they're ways of living, sort of directions of life. So Paramita is the perfection, and those are the perfections. We could call these precepts perfections because we're trying to perfect, become an arhat with those. Paramita also can be looked at as param and mita, and not being a Sanskrit scholar, I'm going to risk screwing this up, but I believe those roots have the same valence as gate gate paragate, which is to go beyond, to go to the other shore. There's a crossing over. So it's going from this shore where we're all suffering and wallowing in misery to where we see clearly, we're filled with compassion, we're filled with loving kindness, and there's release and there's peace on the other side. But the two shores are the same thing. You cross it, but then you realise you didn't cross it.